Hi everyone! Today I'm presenting some findings from an upcoming article that we are co-authoring with Laura and Henrik. This work is still very much in its early stages, but what we are going to do in this paper is to examine whether women and minority candidates, ethnic minority candidates, are disadvantaged in politics. And we are using the same conjoint experiment data that Henrik presented to do the analysis. First, a little bit of the background, why this question. Lately, there has been this wave of enthusiasm about the end of electoral citizen bias against women and racial and ethnic minorities. We have seen more women and ethnic minority candidates of politicians rising to the top position of power. Here, for example, exemplified by Kevin Badenoch, the new leader of the UK Conservatives. Although the enthusiasm and excitement might be a little bit dampened by the US election results, however, of course, this enthusiasm is not only based on real-life examples, but there is actually research that shows that women or female candidates do not face electoral penalties. Rather, female candidates gather as much support or even more support than male candidates. However, there are studies that expect that ethnic minority candidates do attract fewer votes than majority candidates. However, there's also a recent meta-study that finds that this is not the case, that ethnic minorities actually gather as much support. However, the few studies that exist on Muslim candidates show that those ethnic minorities who are perceived to be Muslim do face considerable electoral penalties. In addition, we don't really know how universal these findings are. A majority of these studies are done in Anglo context, or there are specific case studies in specific context. And with the ActEU data from 10 EU countries, we can actually look how the pattern looks for different countries and in the EU. So we have these research questions. We are examining whether women and ethnic minority politicians are disadvantaged compared to majority men politicians. We are interested in the intersectionality of it all. Are ethnic minority women doubly disadvantaged? We also want to look at the descriptive representation and whether women and ethnic minorities have preferences for descriptive representation, and also how does the variation look like across different countries. I will say shortly something about the how the respondents were informed about the gender and ethnicity of the candidates. Gender and ethnicity were given through implicit cues, i.e. the name. You can see here in the table all the names in the different countries. So in the conjoint experiment, there were 4 names, 2 names that signaled apparent female gender, 2 names that signaled the apparent male gender, 2 names that signaled the apparent native origin, and 2 names that signaled apparent kind of foreign origin, more specifically Muslim origin. And here we see all the different names. The Muslim names were the same in all the countries based on the most popular first and last names for Muslim women and men. And in all the countries, the majority names or the native names were based on the most popular first and last names of women and men in that country. We have some expectations. First, we expect that based on the previous research that women don't really face electoral penalties, that a profile having a woman's name will have a positive effect on the 3 outcome variables: choice, likability, and representation. However, we expect that ethnic minorities will face penalties and that there will be a negative effect for all these 3 outcome variables. We expect that minority women will be most disadvantaged and compared to all the other 3 groups: majority man, majority woman, and minority man. We expect women to have preferences for descriptive representation. And we also expect varying effects across countries. And we expect that there will be significant and substantial differences in the preferences for women politician profiles and ethnic minority profiles across the 10 countries that are part of the study. Finally, we expect that profiles with a woman's name will have a negative effect on choice in countries with smaller shares of women in national parliament. Some findings. First, here we see some direct effects. And we find that gender doesn't have a significant effect on choice, likability, or representation. So women are not penalized, nor are they rewarded in this conjoint experiment. However, we find that ethnic minority name has a negative effect on choice, likability, and representation, meaning that ethnic minorities do face considerable difficulties when running for office. When we look at intersectionality, we had this expectation that minority women would be the ones that are most disadvantaged. And we do see that both minority men and minority women are penalized. However, it is not actually minority women who are penalized the most severely. Rather, the results suggest that minority men or Muslim minority men are at disadvantage compared to Muslim minority women. We look at the descriptive representation. Here we see that, yes, women respondents do are more likely to prefer women profiles over men profiles. However, the differences are quite small, so there isn't really this strong preference for descriptive representation, but there is some. And here we come to the differences across countries. And here we found something that we thought were really, really interesting results. We see that in substantial number of countries, gender doesn't really matter for choice. However, there are countries where women are penalized when running for office. And these countries are Germany and Spain. So even though the general results were that, gender doesn't matter, women are not penalized, nor are they rewarded, there are some countries where women are penalized when running for office. And we wanted to kind of dive a little bit deeper into this. So we look at the preferences for descriptive representation across countries to see whether there would be any patterns. And yes, we do find that in Germany, but especially in Spain, both man and women respondents prefer male candidate profiles over women candidate profiles. So yes, so this was a really interesting finding. For ethnicity, we wanted to look at the difference across countries, and here we see that there is a negative effect in all of the countries for an ethnic minority profile. So minority penalties are comparable for all countries. They are not really a variation. There's no country where ethnic minority, there would be a positive effect for an ethnic minority candidate. It's negative in all of the countries and all of the outcome variables. And finally, we look at the effect of the share of the women in the national parliament. Here we divided countries into the three categories based on the level of representation. We have the lower representation with under 30% of women in the national parliament, intermediate with 30 to 40% of women in the national parliament, and high with over 40% of women in the national parliament. And here we see that in the choice outcome, nothing is really significant. So it seems that it doesn't really matter for choice, but there's significant effect in context with lower shares of women in the parliament for likability and representation. So in countries where there's less women in the parliament, female candidates are more liked or felt more representative that based on these findings. As you might have noticed, this presentation has focused mostly on gender. However, our upcoming analysis, we will look more into the ethnic minority part of this research, and we will look into the descriptive representation and whether there is a preference for descriptive representation among ethnic minorities, both in general, but specifically for those who are of Muslim origin. And then we will also look at whether the share of immigrant background minorities in the national parliament affects kind of the results of what kind of effect in choice the ethnic minority candidates have.